The guests mocked her and tried to convince the billionaire to replace his wife. That was the part that stung the most. Not the whispers, not the laughter, not the pointed glances toward the polished row of wealthy socialites lined up like merchandise on display, calculating smiles when they thought no one was watching. But the way they spoke about a black elegant lady, Izabel, as if she were disposable, correctable, replaceable, as if Avery Hale, the billionaire, the investor, the man who could have any woman in the city, needed someone better, someone more suitable, someone flawless. Izabel stood near the edge of the grand ballroom, clutching a delicate champagne tray. Her hands were steady on the outside, but her chest tightened with every word that sliced invisibly through the air. The whispers carried like wind, brushing against her ears, curling around her ribs. "She's sweet, but not refined enough for him," a socialite whispered, eyes flicking toward Avery. "You deserve someone who elevates you, not someone who drags you down." Another chimed in, the words sliding off their tongues like polished knives. "Honestly, Avery, someone from our circle, someone flawless. Someone flawless. Someone who wasn't Izabel." Isabel's eyes swept across the room, taking in the meticulously polished surfaces, the sparkling chandeliers, the gilded walls reflecting the muted glow of crystal and gold. The orchestral music swelled softly in the background, but it felt like a battlefield soundtrack. Sweet notes hiding the tension, amplifying every sharp edge of whispered judgment. The women they were pointing to, socialites lined up like royalty waiting for coronation, smiled perfectly, nodding just slightly, like predators in a tableau. Their hair was arranged without a strand out of place. Their nails gleamed, their eyes sparkled with practiced calculation. They were ready, waiting for Avery to falter, waiting to be chosen. Avery stood across the room, calm, controlled, his gaze drifting over the socialites before landing on Izabel. There was no hesitation, no confusion, only focus. Every muscle in his face exuded subtle tension, but he did not flinch. He had heard every word, seen every glance, sensed every manipulation. He always did. Isabel's chest tightened. Her throat burned. Her fingers trembled, clutching the tray lightly, but she didn't move, didn't flinch. She had learned long ago that sometimes silence was more powerful than any protest. Sometimes the world had to watch while you stood still, allowed yourself to be measured and found worthy. "She's sweet, but so understated," a blonde socialite murmured, leaning toward Avery, tilting her head slightly. Her voice was calm, smooth, but her eyes glittered with ambition and malice. "You deserve someone with poise, Avery. Someone who complements your stature, your reputation." "She's fine, but not the image," another added, each syllable crafted to undermine, to erode confidence, to plant seeds of doubt. A seed, however small, was meant to grow. Avery, they hoped, would glance at Izabel and see her falter, see her fail to meet the standards they set. And then, like a prize, they would step forward, perfect, poised, flawless, replaceable. Izabel inhaled slowly, feeling the familiar sting of insecurity brush against her thoughts. She remembered the nights before their first gala, wondering if she truly belonged in these rooms, if she truly deserved to walk beside Avery. Nights spent polishing her gowns, arranging her hair, practicing smiles until they felt natural. Every effort she had made, every ounce of preparation, now under the scrutiny of eyes that were not satisfied with her being human. Avery's gaze found hers, and in that moment, everything else, the whispers, the pointed gestures, the smiles hiding venom, faded into the background. He had seen her, really seen her. "You have to understand, Avery." One socialite leaned closer, her voice soft but edged. "You could do so much better, someone more refined." Avery's jaw tightened, a subtle flex of muscle, barely perceptible, but enough to send the women flinching, recalculating. He didn't respond immediately, his eyes never leaving Izabel, but every line of his posture radiated control. Izabel felt a faint warmth in her chest. Relief? Perhaps. Or perhaps it was recognition, an acknowledgement that someone had seen her, known her, and claimed her without hesitation. Another socialite nudged her shoulder against Avery's arm, tried to catch his attention with a soft laugh. Marissa, Tessa, you know how it is. These events are strategic. You deserve someone compatible. Izabel's breath caught. She could feel her legs trembling under the silk of her gown, the nerves threatening to betray her, but she held the tray with deliberate steadiness. She would not flinch. Not tonight. Avery's hand brushed lightly near hers. Not a touch meant for show, but a quiet reminder of his presence, a shield of ownership, of protection. The subtle motion was enough to communicate what words could not. I see you. I choose you. The socialites were growing desperate. One of them, blonde and angular, stepped closer, voice dripping sweetness and threat together. Avery, surely you don't mean to ignore the options before you. These women, they're perfect for you. Your future, your image. Avery's gaze remained unwavering. He took a small step closer to Izabel, as if the space between them itself was a declaration. Calmly measured, he spoke, not loudly, but every ear that could hear understood. She's my wife. The room froze. A subtle gasp, lips pressed tightly, eyes widening. Their carefully constructed world began to crumble. Plans whispered behind closed doors, calculated schemes. Every tiny manipulation. They meant nothing. Izabel had survived the whispers. She had survived the scrutiny. And Avery's words solidified that victory. Izabel's fingers relaxed slightly on the tray. Her hand still trembled faintly, but the tray remained balanced, poised. She felt the heat of recognition, warmed in her chest, the small surge of pride that came not from a room, but from a man who stood unwavering beside her. Some of the socialites tried to regain composure, forcing polite smiles, nodding faintly. Of course, Avery. Naturally, one said, though the words trembled under the weight of embarrassment and disbelief. Avery's hand brushed hers again, grounding her, signaling solidarity. His eyes searched hers, not for flaw or perfection, but for acknowledgement, and she gave him the smallest, quietest nod, allowed herself a breath she hadn't realized she was holding all evening. The music swelled, soft notes of violins and piano, but no longer felt like a battlefield. It was a backdrop now, a gentle reminder of the elegance around them, the life they navigated together. The whispers still lingered at the edges, but they could not touch Izabel. She lowered the tray to a side table, letting her fingers brush against crystal lightly. Avery's eyes met hers once more, unwavering, and she knew without doubt she was seen, she was chosen, she was his. Even the socialites, for all their calculations, could not erase her place. They could not diminish her. They could not replace her. And for the first time that night, as the chandeliers sparkled overhead and the warm glow of the ballroom cast golden light across polished marble floors, Izabel smiled, not triumphantly, not arrogantly, but quietly, defiantly, because she had survived, because Avery had chosen her, because she was, in every sense, irreplaceable. The room seemed to hold its breath after Avery's declaration. She's my wife. The words had cut through the polished opulence, through the whispers, through the calculated smiles of the socialites. And now, for the first time that night, the weight of the room shifted. Izabel felt it in her chest. A tremor of relief, yes, but stronger than that, a swelling sense of belonging. She wasn't just standing beside Avery. She was standing with him, anchored by his gaze, his presence, his quiet but unwavering command. The socialites froze for a heartbeat, then quickly began to scramble, as if searching for a way to regain control over a narrative that had slipped from their hands. Marissa, the tall brunette who had whispered first, forced her lips into a polite smile, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly as she whispered under her breath to the woman next to her, "He can't mean it. Surely he's bluffing." But Avery wasn't bluffing. He had not just said the words, he had meant them. Every gesture, every subtle micro-expression screamed certainty. Not arrogance, not posturing. Certainty. A young socialite, blonde with a tilted pearl necklace, leaned forward slightly, her voice sweet, controlled. "Avery, you must understand, we only want the best for you. Someone who truly complements your status, your legacy." Avery's response was calm, measured, yet carried a weight that left the woman staring blankly for a moment. "My best interests are already taken care of." By her, a hush fell. Even the orchestra, which had resumed its delicate swells, seemed muted. The words, so simple, so definitive, were louder than any music, louder than the laughter or the whispers. Izabel's hands, which had been holding the champagne tray with the rigidity of composure, finally relaxed. She set the tray on a side table, feeling the subtle warmth of Avery's hand brush hers. Not a show of dominance, but a grounding touch, intimate and reassuring. She could hear the socialites whispering again, but this time their words were frantic, panicked. The careful calculations, the endless strategies, the hours spent imagining scenarios to replace her. They were unraveling. One woman tried charm. She extended her hand toward Avery, tilting her head in a practiced way, her lips curling into a smile that was meant to disarm. "We only mean well, Avery. Surely you see." He didn't take her hand. He didn't even look at her. Instead, he looked at Izabel, his eyes carrying something more than protection. Recognition, respect, love. "She's mine," he said, voice low but rich, carrying clearly enough for those close to hear. Izabel felt the tension in the room spike and then slowly release. She didn't move closer to Avery, not yet, but she didn't retreat either. She stood firm, feeling the power of being truly seen, the rare and exhilarating strength of being chosen when others try to convince the world you were replaceable. The socialites tried to regroup. One whispered something about alliances, another murmured about long-term connections, but their voices lacked conviction. They had anticipated hesitation, indecision, even doubt, but Avery had none. And Izabel, she had none either. She allowed herself a small smile, quiet, almost imperceptible, but it carried the weight of defiance. She didn't need to speak. The world could see her now. And Avery, standing silently beside her, made sure everyone understood the stakes. She was not replaceable. Avery's hand slid lightly across the small of her back, a subtle signal for her to move closer as he guided her through the crowd. Guests parted instinctively, sensing the quiet authority emanating from him. The socialites' eyes darted from him to Izabel, calculating new strategies even as they realized the futility of their previous attempts. "You were amazing," Avery murmured softly, just enough for her to hear over the faint hum of conversation and orchestral music. "Every single one of them doubted you. They tried to undermine you. And yet, you stood there composed, unshakable." Izabel's throat tightened. I was scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I could hear everything. I thought, maybe what?" Avery prompted, tilting his head slightly, a hint of a smile playing at the corner of his lips. "That maybe I wasn't enough," she said finally. "That you'd see them instead." His gaze softened, unwavering. "Izabel, I've chosen you. From the moment I realized no one else could ever matter more than you. Tonight only proves it, to them and to you. No one can replace you. Ever." The warmth of his words wrapped around her, grounding her, easing the tension in her shoulders. For the first time that night, Izabel felt the true depth of safety in his presence, not the safety of wealth or status or security, but the safety of being seen fully and completely by someone who loved her unconditionally. But she also knew the socialites would not relent. They would continue to whisper, to manipulate, to strategize. They thrived on drama, on envy, on the illusion of control. Yet Izabel felt stronger than she had in years, fortified by Avery's unwavering confidence in her. One woman, desperate to regain some semblance of authority, stepped forward, voice honeyed and dangerous. "Avery, surely you don't mean to dismiss all reason. These women, they're irrelevant." Avery interrupted smoothly, his gaze never leaving Izabel's. "I don't care about their schemes, their opinions, or their calculated smiles. She is my wife. That is all that matters." The silence that followed was palpable. Even the distant laughter of other guests seemed to fade into nothingness. The chandeliers above glittered, casting golden light over the polished floors, illuminating the quiet triumph between the couple. Izabel felt her chest rise with a quiet pride, not arrogance, not triumph over others, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had survived, of knowing she was chosen, of knowing her worth was defined by love. Not envy, not wealth, not whispers. Avery guided her to a quieter corner of the ballroom, where the music seemed to soften and the murmurs of gossip faded into background noise. His hand rested lightly on the small of her back, protective but gentle, and she allowed herself to relax. "You were perfect," he murmured again. "Graceful, composed, unshakable. Did you see their faces? They thought they could intimidate you, make you falter. But you didn't. You stood your ground. And they've realized what I've always known." Izabel's lips curved into a tentative smile. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said softly. "You could have," he replied, brushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "But I wouldn't let them try to touch you. Not tonight. Not ever." They stood there for a long moment, the world around them fading into insignificance. Wealth, status, gossip. They could all try, but they could not penetrate the bond between them. And in that quiet corner, amidst a grandeur, chandeliers, polished floors, and gold accents, Izabel felt the immense weight of truth settle in her chest. She was seen, chosen, and irreplaceable. As Avery led her back into the crowd, hand brushing hers in subtle reassurance, Izabel felt a newfound strength. She would no longer allow whispers, envy, or calculated smiles to define her. She had survived the storm, and she had done it standing beside the man who loved her fiercely, completely, and without hesitation. The Socialites, despite their attempts to recover, could no longer define her. Their words, their schemes, their strategies, they all fell flat in the presence of unwavering love and quiet strength. And as the night wore on, Izabel walked beside Avery with quiet confidence, each step a declaration. She was not disposable. She was not correctable. She was not replaceable. She was his. She was seen. She was home.